Hello everyone and welcome back to LewisFiction and welcome to pre-writing the MCU Spider-Man College Trilogy. If you are new around here and you're not subscribed to the channel but you love Spider-Man and you love Spider-Man stories, then make sure you are subscribed. We're so close to 5,000 subscribers, we're like 50 subscribers away at this point, so make sure you are subscribed. With that said, let's get straight into the pitch. A year has passed since Spider-Man No Way Home. We open up with Peter standing over Aunt May's grave, once again asking her if she's okay. We get the sense that Peter hasn't moved on. We get the sense that Peter is still suffering from the consequences of No Way Home. Peter is suffering with mental health issues and Peter is suffering with the death of Aunt May. And this is when we are reintroduced to another character that we've become so familiar with from the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Of course, that is Happy Hogan, who once again bumps into Peter. However, obviously, because of the end of No Way Home, Happy doesn't know who Peter is. However, since it has been a year since Spider-Man No Way Home, they have bumped into each other a few times at Aunt May's grave. In fact, they are on first name basis now and they've gotten to know each other slightly over the death of May. Just as they get talking, asking if each other are okay, Peter's phone rings. Duty calls, as he leaves Happy and swings into the distance. Peter's brand new phone tracker for crime alerts him to more criminal activity downtown in New York. Spider-Man swoops in and stops some criminals. And Spider-Man isn't lethargic and it doesn't look like he knows what he's doing. In fact, all the inexperience that he showcased during the last trilogy, the Homecoming trilogy, all but seems gone. Spider-Man is a very thorough superhero and he gets things done quickly and efficiently, representing how much time Peter actually spends as Spider-Man. We will talk more about this later on in the film, but now Peter does stop some criminals. Peter's been busting operations around the city, thinking that it's all connected. He's actually following a trail of crimes that have been happening over the last couple of months, and it's becoming apparent that he's become a real thorn in the side of people in the criminal underworld. We then cut back to Peter's apartment as the Daily Bugle report on Spider-Man as their main anchor of news. When the Spider-Man news passes, we are also introduced to the idea that Wilson Fisk is running for the mayor of New York City. This will also be showcased through the same news segment on the Daily Bugle as well. It is also revealed in this same scene that Peter has been sending J. Jonah Jameson videos and photos of himself as Spider-Man, and this is also revealed to be the reason as to how he's being able to pay for his apartment. Along with the fact that he's at college, he also gets some rent covered by the college itself too. Also during this scene, we will get a good look at Peter's apartment. It is bare. There's nothing in it, showing how Peter Parker is slowly sort of fading from existence. He has no books, he has no posters, he has nothing of character. There is nothing that screams, hey, this is Peter Parker's room. This is Spider-Man's room only. There is nothing to showcase the type of person that Peter Parker is. It is all just equipment and tech and basically stuff that Peter uses out and about as Spider-Man. The one thing of note is the sewing machine in the corner that he used at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home. We then get a scene of Peter attending college where he goes to Empire State University. It is also kinda hinted at here as well that the only reason Peter actually goes to college is so that the college can pay for a part of his apartment. If not, Peter seems like he wouldn't really be bothered to be there, as like we mentioned, Peter Parker is slowly fading from his life. He has nothing to do with anyone, he has nothing to do with himself, he only really cares about what goes on while he's wearing the mask. Either way, while Peter is at college, we get introduced to a set of new side characters in this trilogy, including Miles Morales and Carly Cooper. Peter won't know these people very well, only on a first name basis. However, it's clear that Peter has interacted with these people enough to sort of know who they are. It is also hinted at this point in the film that Peter might have a slight crush on Carly Cooper. They don't speak with each other, but they smile at each other in the hallway and nod to each other in class, nothing more. Peter longs for love. He longs for human connection, but he knows he can't. The weight of the loss of Aunt May reigns supreme on his shoulders. He would love to make a move on Carly Cooper, he would love to try and get to know her more, but being Spider-Man is holding him back from that. The teacher, who in this new trilogy will go by the name of Professor Miles Warren, will introduce the idea that the college class have to do a project, and they have to be in pairs, pairing up with one another to get it done. Peter is in fact paired up with Miles, and they get to work on the project together. However, just as they were about to use that same lecture to start on their project, Peter's phone is on crime watch and has to leave early, leaving Miles to start up the project by himself. Miles doesn't think much of it at first, as Peter leaves. This is when we cut to Spider-Man fighting another bunch of criminals. It is another criminal bust, and Spider-Man brings it to a close, when he bumps into a familiar face at the crime scene, Mac Gargan, the person that he put away during Spider-Man Homecoming. However, we learn in this scene, this isn't the second time that Spider-Man and Mac Gargan have come into contact with one another. It is revealed that after the end of No Way Home, Mac Gargan has been constantly escaping and re-escaping prison, which means that Spider-Man has put him away a few times before. They have a bit of witty banter with each other, and Mac Gargan is furious. Spider-Man has foiled his plans once again. However, before Peter could deal with the crime fully himself, someone else arrives on the scene. It is a woman, another vigilante figure, who goes by the name of Black Cat. Peter will be confused at first. He knows of Hawkeye, he knows of Daredevil, but he's never seen Black Cat before. As they both introduce themselves to one another after the crime scene, Spider-Man asks Black Cat who is she, and she'll say that doesn't matter. She's trying to get to the bottom of all of these crimes just like Spider-Man is, but she's doing it for a different reason. A reason that she won't reveal to Spider-Man just yet. She thinks she has a lead. A man called Wilson Fisk is supposed to be at the top of everything. That's what Black Cat has discovered. Spider-Man and Black Cat call a truce and decide to work together on this case as their goals align with one another. We then cut to Mac Gargan in prison, where his family come to see him. Mac has a little girl who cries, saying that she wants her father back. We then see the stakes for Mac Gargan here. We see what he is losing. He's fighting for his family. He isn't just another random thug on the street. Mac Gargan is given some humanity here. He is given a reason to fight, a reason to be a criminal, and it is slowly revealed the reason as to why he keeps trying to re-escape from prison over the last year. He has a family to fight for. He has a family to come back to. Mac will tell his daughter that he's going to make this right. He promises he'll make this right. And this is when we cut to none other than Wilson Fisk approaching Mac Gargan after funding his bail. Mac will ask Fisk why he bailed him out, and Fisk will tell Mac that he has a mission for him. The heroes of New York are crushing his empire, and they're coming pretty close to tearing the whole thing down. Once he becomes mayor, it'll be a lot easier, but until then, he needs help. He's already got forces keeping Daredevil occupied. He now needs someone to take care of Spider-Man. Because over the last year, Spider-Man has become a real thorn in his side. Spider-Man has almost become the worst part of the vigilante circle in New York. Spider-Man has power, and it's clear that a bunch of guns won't take him down. He needs someone more specialized to deal with his type of character. And this is where Mac Gargan comes in. Wilson Fisk will take him back to his hideout, where they reveal a machine and a costume. Mac will ask Fisk what he's going to do to him, and Fisk will say he's going to give him power to defeat Spider-Man. Mac will ask what's in it for him, and Fisk will say he will reward him sufficiently. He wants him and his family to live wealthy, right? He wants him and his family to have no worries in the world. Mac simply gulps, but nods in agreement. Fisk will tell him that he can make all his worries go away if he just does what he says. And then in a moment of truth, Mac agrees as he steps into the machine and becomes the Scorpion. We then cut back to Peter in his apartment. Miles texts Peter saying that the college project needs doing. When will he be available to do it? Peter says he can do it tomorrow. We then cut to the next day as they meet at Peter's apartment. Miles decides to set up and get straight into it when Peter's new criminal phone tracker buzzes. All units are being dispatched down to Times Square. It's very rare that all the NYPD services would be called to the same location in New York, Peter will think to himself. That means that something big is going down. And that's when Peter finds out that a massive green scorpion is making a ruckus in Times Square, and Peter has to leave. He apologizes to Miles as he says he's going to have to leave. Peter has to take care of something that he forgot about. Miles is frustrated as he backs out of the door. Peter makes his way over to Times Square, swinging over to see what the commotion was. The Scorpion will tell Spider-Man that he's been expecting him. As Spider-Man engages with the Scorpion expresses his power. Spider-Man hasn't dealt with a villain like this since the end of Spider-Man No Way Home when he fought the Green Goblin. This catches Spider-Man off guard as Scorpion reveals his power. The performance enhancers and the mechanical suit given to him by Wilson Fisk has given him a fighting chance against Spider-Man. This is when Peter realizes that it's actually Mac Gargan underneath the Scorpion suit. Spider-Man will try to break through to Mac, saying this isn't him. He needs to stop this right now. The Scorpion almost gets him down when Black Cat comes in to save him. However, Peter is hurt. A massive gash of blood is stricken across his chest. And with Peter down, they just about escape, with Black Cat helping them get away. We then cut to a scene where Black Cat and Spider-Man lay in an alleyway. Black Cat says he's losing a lot of blood, as she pulls out some emergency bandages from her utility belt. There is a massive gash across Spider-Man's chest, and Black Cat helps him by cleaning it. Spider-Man will say they're onto him. That was Mac Gargan. They're fighting back. Whoever they are, Wilson Fisk or someone else, they are fighting back. Cat will tell him to not worry and to just stay still as she cleans his wound. Peter grunts in pain
as she cleans it more. She eventually finishes by placing some pressure on it as well. However, during this moment, they lock eyes, and in a moment of intimacy, they end up kissing, Peter feeling that human connection once again. Peter initiating the kiss, but Black Cat didn't stop him, as Black Cat leans in for it as well. They look at each other as they pull away, Peter with half of his mask up his face, but still covering his eyes. Black Cat with her mask on completely. Peter will say to Cat that he wants to know who she is under that mask. He wants to know who she is, he wants to get to know her, but Black Cat says that doesn't matter. She's a nobody. He's a nobody, affirming Peter's inner conflict. Peter will look down, as Cat will say they're both nobodies, running around in stupid costumes. Cat will say they don't need to make this any more than it needs to be. They kissed, and that was it. Nothing more. We then cut to the next day as J. Jonah Jameson is bashing Peter for not sending him videos and photos from last night's Times Square attack with the Scorpion and Spider-Man at the scene. Peter tells him he's sorry, he just didn't get any. Obviously, Peter knowing he was too preoccupied. Peter then goes into college that same day, and Miles isn't very happy. Miles approaches him saying he's a jerk. He's a self-absorbed jerk, and all he thinks about is himself and no one else. He says that he's getting someone new to work with on the project. Peter tells him to wait, but Miles says no. He tells Peter he needs to sort his life out. He can't just keep blowing people off like this. He's done, as he walks away, leaving Peter all by himself. Peter then sits alone that lunch, at college, on a bench, and none other than Carly Cooper approaches him. She sits down next to him, and asks if he's alright. This is one of the only times that they've ever really spoken. But from a distance a few moments prior, Carly had noticed that Peter was all alone and kind of looked lonely and sad. Peter says that he's okay. Carly tells him that she sees him sitting by himself most of the day, most days, and not really talking to anyone. She says she's sorry if this is really weird, but she just feels bad for him. He probably has his reasons, but she wanted to make sure he was doing okay. Peter smiles, appreciating it, saying he is doing okay. As okay as he could do. Carly says this might be a bit forward, but if you ever need to talk, here is her number, as she hands Peter her number and walks off. Peter smiles, watching Carly as she walks off into the distance. For once in the last year, something nice actually happened to Peter Parker. This was something new. This was a feeling that Peter hadn't felt for a very, very long time. A light in the dark, if you will. We then cut to a scene with Scorpion and Wilson Fisk. They've battered Spider-Man down. Now, they need to hit him where it hurts. They both come up with the plan to try and find someone who is close to Spider-Man that they can take and to kidnap so they can draw him out and try and get him to concede. The closest person that they can find to anything Spider-Man related is in fact Peter Parker, who is the one who takes photos and videos of Spider-Man for the Daily Bugle. Maybe he is their best shot. So Scorpion sets out on his mission, saying he'll go and pay Peter Parker a visit. We then cut back to Peter, who spends most of the afternoon making a new suit as his old one got ripped. He visits Aunt May's grave once again, asking what does he do? Peter is slipping and it's hurting people. What does he do? And then, none other than Happy Hogan, who appeared at the start of the film, appears behind him once again, telling Peter they have to stop meeting like this. Happy says he's feeling lost without her, isn't he? And Peter says he is. Happy will go on to ask Peter what he's struggling with, and Peter will say everything. He keeps people in his life at an arm's length because he's scared they'll be hurt by him, and he's too busy with his quote-unquote work life. Happy will say he knows how that feels, referring back to past events in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Happy will tell Peter that he has to make time for those people, and be honest with them. Tell them that you're busy, but you'll always be there for them, and most importantly, don't isolate yourself. It's not healthy. He'll go on to say that it's all about finding that balancing act. You can't have yin without yang, you can't have one without the other. And with that, Happy will walk off into the distance, and Peter will contemplate. He'll think to himself as he carries on looking over Aunt May's grave. Happy is right. Aunt May wouldn't want him to live like this. Neither would Uncle Ben. Neither would Tony Stark. Neither would anyone else who was in his life that loved him. No one would want Peter Parker to be in the state that he's in. But all of that will have to wait. Peter still has one main mission as Spider-Man. The Scorpion is still at large. The Scorpion is still out there and needs bringing in before he hurts or puts anyone else in danger. We then cut to another scene with Spider-Man and Black Cat discussing for the final battle with Scorpion. They will say that it's only a matter of time before Scorpion tries to draw them out again. So this time they need to be ready. This time they need to be ready to take him down. But there is still one thing that looms over this situation. Spider-Man is confused. He asks Black Cat, why is he even helping him? What's in it for her? Why is she even doing this? Kat once again tells him that she said it doesn't matter why. That's not important. Who she is and her reasonings do not matter to him. Peter relays the message that Happy gave to him, telling her that it's not healthy to be isolated. It's not healthy to keep emotions bottled up inside. And with this, relaying that same message, relaying the lesson that Peter has just learned, Black Cat eventually breaks, revealing her face to Peter Parker, revealing to him that her name is in fact Felicia Hardy. Her father was killed by Wilson Fisk, and she wants revenge. Getting back at him is all that matters to her now. And that's why she does what she does. She's fighting for what's right. She's fighting for what she believes is the right thing to do. And that's why Peter says that they will stop him, and they will stop the Scorpion. We then cut to Miles, who is at his home in Brooklyn, working on the college project, when he feels a sense of remorse for how he spoke to Peter. He doesn't know what's going on in Peter's life. There could be a very good reason as to why he didn't show. Miles was just frustrated. He was angry. He feels like he was rightly so, but still, he doesn't really know Peter that well. Miles decides to talk to him in person as he heads down to Peter's apartment and knocks on his door, asking to speak to him. He didn't call because he thought Peter wouldn't answer, but as Miles knocks again, no one is in. Miles says if he's in there, he's sorry for speaking to him that way. He was just angry. He hopes he understands, as he leans his head on the side of the door. But before anyone else inside could answer, the Scorpion attacks Peter's apartment, bashing through the floor. Miles falls over as he cowers to the corner, and then the Scorpion sees Miles. The Scorpion will ask, where is Peter Parker? And Miles says he doesn't know, he doesn't even know him that well, as he tries to run off. But the Scorpion grabs him with his tail, holding him captive. Peter and Black Cat see the cop cars racing towards where Peter lives. They both travel over there to see the Scorpion holding Miles. The Scorpion drops Miles as Peter webs him to safety. They both engage in battle, Cat and Spider-Man both trying to corner the Scorpion, taking attacks together, trying to neutralize him. The Scorpion is eventually defeated in a massive battle right down to the wire, with Spider-Man and Black Cat coming out on top. Scorpion is eventually taken away to Rikers Island. After all the dust is settled, we cut to the end of the film where Spider-Man and Black Cat are on top of a rooftop. Cat says that she thought about what Peter said. He's right. Looking for revenge and hiding behind a mask is isolating. She's going to have to take a break for a while and focus on her and see her family, because they're grieving too. They hug as they part ways, ending Black Cat's story there. However, Peter has some resolving to do, not just with other people, but in his own life as well. Peter gives Miles a call, and they make up, as they agree to work on the project together, and Peter decides to set aside some time with Miles only, so they can both work together and get this thing done. He puts the phone down and flicks through the rest of his contacts to see Carly Cooper. He presses the dial button, as he asks Carly if she'd like to go for a coffee, and maybe talk some things over. Peter finally realizing that maybe he should approach people. Maybe he should stop isolating himself from the world and build back up relationships with other people. Carly said that she'd love to, and Peter says great, how about 12 o'clock tomorrow? And Carly agrees, saying she'll see him there. As they both put down the phone, we end the film right there. But there is one post-credit scene in this film. Even though the battle was won and Scorpion was beaten, the war still rages on, as it's announced that Wilson Fisk wins the election and becomes the mayor of New York City, taking a power stance going forward for the rest of the trilogy.
So there are a few precursors that I just want to address before we get straight into this film. Essentially, the Kingpin War from MCU Spider-Man 4 still rages on. I don't think this Kingpin saga would have been wrapped up straight away in Spider-Man 4, that's why it is continued into this film and into MCU Spider-Man 6 as well. We've also got to remember that Kingpin is a big player in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole, not just the Spider-Man films. So even though Kingpin will be more on the back burner for MCU Spider-Man 5, his presence will still be felt, and at the beginning of this movie, Spider-Man will be stopping crimes as the war still rages on. We will then cut to two of the main players for this film, Roderick Kingsley and the Symbiote. We follow a series of events from the end of Spider-Man No Way Home, as we see that the symbiote that actually was left in the Marvel Cinematic Universe ends up in the hands of Roderick Kingsley, who at this point is a fashion designer. Now, I'm taking a little bit of a different direction for the symbiote in this version of the story, where you guys are just going to have to wait and see what there is later in the film. But either way, Roderick Kingsley comes into possession of the symbiote. And this is where we are then reintroduced to Peter Parker, our main protagonist. protagonist, catching us up on events that have transpired and updating us on the Kingpin War. However, this is also when we are introduced to Peter's main story in this film. Peter wakes up from a dream where he imagined Carly Cooper dying just like Aunt May. Not only that, Peter watches on as Carly dies at the hands of the Green Goblin, specifically Tobey Maguire's version of the Green Goblin, just like Aunt May did in Spider-Man No Way Home. The arc that I portrayed for Peter in the last film was that he didn't have to stay closed off from society. He was allowed to let other people into his life because he realized that's the way that Aunt May would want him to live. However, in this film, after the events taking place in between MCU Spider-Man 4 and 5, Peter and Carly have actually gotten closer with one another and have gone on a few dates. But because of this, Peter is starting to regress. Peter is starting to feel like the same thing is going to happen to Carly that happened to Aunt May. We do know that Peter hasn't been this close with anyone since, of course, May's passing. And now that he is close with the likes of Carly Cooper and even Miles Morales, he will start to see them dying in his nightmares, setting up Peter's story for this film. We will then cut to a scene where Carly and Peter go out on a date. It's the beginning of their relationship, as they haven't really been on many dates before, but there is some clear chemistry between them and they get on pretty well. The date goes on as we learn more about Carly. She is also currently studying at ESU, but she is studying fashion design. And in this first portion of this section of the first act, we'll start to learn more about Carly Cooper as a character. After the date ends, it's really clear that they both like each other, and Carly asks Peter to go out again on another date, and Peter says yes. They agree on a day the following week as they part ways. When Peter gets home to his apartment, he'll open a letter that showcases that rent prices have been going up. After the war on New York, with Kingpin and his goons, and with all the superheroes fighting back against him, rent prices have gone up since the destruction of buildings, apartments, and just accommodation in general has become more prominent across the city. It's almost like Spider-Man is causing Peter's own downfall, but there's nothing he can do about it. So to combat this issue, Peter goes to J. Jonah Jameson to have a meeting with him. This will be the first time that we get to see J. Jonah Jameson and Peter Parker actually interact in person, since most of their interactions in the last movie were over the phone. A lot of what Peter does for J. Jonah Jameson with this version of the character will be mostly digital. That's because we live in a digital age where photos, like in the Tobey Maguire films and in the early Stan Lee and Steve Ditko comics, aren't handed in over the counter anymore. Rather, they're just emailed in. However, this meeting will be important. Peter is usually the head photographer on taking photos of Spider-Man and superhero stuff. However, Peter will be requesting to J. Jonah Jameson if he can get some more work. It's not like supervillains come around every other day, so Peter's gotta pay his bills somehow. And since Peter has been loyal to J. Jonah Jameson and the Daily Bugle thus far, Jameson puts him on the media team to go and take photos at the Kingsley Expo. When Peter asks what the Kingsley Expo is, J. Jonah Jameson explains that it's essentially a fashion event where Roderick Kingsley, the fashion designer, will show off brand new clothes that he's going to start selling worldwide. It's a pretty big deal in the fashion industry, so Peter must make sure he's there on time. Jameson also stresses that it's really important to make sure he gets a really good and clear photo of Roderick Kingsley showing off some of the outfits. Jameson is looking to publish an exclusive on some of the products. With this in mind, Peter leaves. However, when Peter makes it home, he then realizes that the Kingsley Expo actually clashes with the date that he was meant to go on with Carly. The next day, Peter is at college. He bumps into Miles and they catch up with each other. He asks Miles what he is to do, because he doesn't know how to approach the situation and break Carly off. Miles tells him to be straight with her, tell her that he has a job. Peter will say to Miles that he can't do that. What if she just blows him off completely? And Miles says that she's not going to do that. She'll respect the fact that Peter has work to do. And Peter says that he's right. We then cut to a scene where Peter tells Carly that he can't make their date as he's got a job. Carly is slightly annoyed at first, but is generally okay with it as she understands. Things like this happen, and she says they'll just rearrange for another time. Our next scene will be Peter arriving at the Kingsley Expo event. However, as Peter trundles around trying to take photos of things he thinks Jameson would find important, he then bumps into none other than Carly Cooper, who is there as a fashion student gathering inspiration. They are both surprised to see each other, and Peter asks Carly what she's doing there. Carly will tell Peter that since he cancelled their date, she decided to come to the expo instead. As a fashion student, looking at the competition sometimes really helps her, she'll tell Peter. Peter will tell Carly that he's only doing this for the money and he actually has no idea what's going on. And that's when we'll get some exposition into who Roderick Kingsley is as a person, as Carly Cooper will fill Peter in as to who he is. She will tell Peter that Roderick Kingsley is one of the best in the game, and will tell him that everyone wants to be him. He is literally the king of fashion, and that this fashion show is going to be one of the biggest expos of the entire year. And she'll also tell Peter that Kingsley has teased something big for tonight's grand reveal. Wondering as to what it could be, Peter and Carly watch on as Roderick Kingsley enters the stage, giving us a grand introduction. He's confident, he's suave, and he's got lots of charisma. This is when we learn about Roderick Kingsley's fashion show, and we learn about the types of designs he does. He's extravagant and outgoing, and just like he is as a person, his designs completely represent his persona. Roderick will reveal a new line of clothing and unique and wacky fashion items inspired by villains from New York's past. Kingsley will explain that he wanted to turn some of the villains that have loomed over New York in the past into fashion pieces as to spread a new light and a new meaning to the situation that was caused by them. Obviously, Peter sitting there in the audience finds this incredibly weird as Kingsley rolls out outfits inspired by the likes of Scorpion and many other MCU villains. But it really hits home when Roderick Kingsley reveals the main piece of the entire line, an outfit inspired by what people are calling the Green Goblin, the man on the bridge from the events of Spider-Man No Way Home. Roderick Kingsley calls it the Hobgoblin. As everyone claps, Peter's face sinks as he's reminded by the Green Goblin's presence. Just as his dream reminded him at the start of the film, Peter Parker cannot escape the Goblin. The hood, the torso, the leggings, the boots, everything screamed the Green Goblin. Even though its colour scheme was slightly different and of course inspired by the Green Goblin, it still hit where it hurt for Peter. And that's when Kingsley goes on to his grand reveal. He hypes up the audience by saying this fashion piece will literally change the way we think about fashion and will change the world forever. As he brings out a glass container, he holds black goo in front of the audience that moves around seamlessly by itself. He tells the audience that this is a living, breathing piece of clothing, that what he's holding in front of him will transform into any piece of clothing he puts his mind to. And as he opens the glass container, Roderick Kingsley puts on the black goo as it attaches to his skin. And on mere command, the suit transforms from a mere tracksuit to a tuxedo, and then from a tuxedo into some sportswear. Roderick Kingsley says that this is the future of fashion. Whatever this material is, it can be used to create any piece of clothing that you demand of it. Kingsley then places the goo back in the glass container, but before Peter could grab a photo of Kingsley, his spider sense goes off as the window beside him smashes in and a bunch of guards come running into the room. Peter guides Carly to safety and then leaves. Carly begs him not to leave her alone, but Peter has no choice. He transforms into his Spider-Man suit as he engages with the guards, who are trying to go after Roderick Kingsley and the glass container. Peter takes out the guards one by one, however the glass container is smashed in the process. After the dust is settled, Spider-Man asks Roderick Kingsley if he knows who those people were, and Kingsley says he has no idea. Spider-Man will say whatever they wanted that black goo, as Peter thinks to himself that he could give a pretty good guess as to who sent those goons. It was probably Wilson Fisk. But as Spider-Man leaves the situation and leaves the scene of the crime, he accidentally steps on some black goo on the floor as it attaches to his leg. Peter wakes up the next morning. He's tired as hell and everything hurts, almost like he's just done an extreme workout. He's confused and he turns on the TV, as multiple news sources report on the return of Night Monkey, a Spider-Man copycat last seen in Prague. Peter laughs it off, thinking someone is impersonating Night Monkey. He thinks that's quite funny, but then he checks his phone. He's got multiple missed calls from J. Jonah Jameson. He then gives JJ another visit, and JJ tells him he's not impressed. Not only did he not get any photos of Kingsley's event, he's also completely missed Night Monkey. He tells Peter that he's never getting extra jobs on top of Spider-Man ever again. We then cut to Kingsley. He's not happy. He's lost the suit. That suit was worth a lot of money. He doesn't know how this has happened, or if one of the goons managed to escape with it. But as he does more research into what it could possibly be, he finds out that potentially that suit could have been more powerful than he could have possibly imagined. Peter returns home. He then calls Carly. Carly reveals to Peter that she's mad at him for leaving her alone when the guards attacks the expo. As Peter tries to apologize, Carly is having none of it, saying that they just need a break for a while. She can't talk to him right now. And as Peter puts the phone down, he lies on his bed and eventually ends up falling asleep. Like the start of the film, Peter starts getting flashes of Carly's death, Miles' death, just like Aunt May's. He sees Toby's Green Goblin, but instead of running away or waking up, he fuels all the emotion that he's just got from that call with Carly and that conversation with J. Jonah Jameson to stand up to the Green Goblin in his dreams. Peter approaches Norman Osborn and starts beating him to death. Peter starts angrily punching him in the face until he actually wakes up. His costume changes around him. Peter looks at his hands. They're black, not red. And then, as reality fades in around him, he sees he's not in a dream at all. He's actually at a crime scene in the middle of New York. He's angrily punching an unarmed man in front of a jewelry store. This isn't a dream anymore. It's real life. Peter drops the man as his face was bloodied. He says he's sorry as he swings off into the distance. This is when the film starts to take a turn. This is the midpoint of the entire film where Peter finally gets the symbiote. As it is revealed through that scene, as the dream faded into reality, Peter is started to use the symbiote as a form of escapism. And the main theme throughout the rest of the film from here on out is that Peter will be using the symbiote's newfound abilities to escape from his fears. This sort of behavior will have metaphorical connotations with substance abuse, representing the inability for Peter to actually open up about his emotions and tell other people around him what he's feeling about what is going on in his life. Rather, Peter will use the symbiote as this form of escapism to escape from his fears and escape from his irrational thoughts. We then get a couple of scenes of Peter scared, but then accepting this newfound power. He thinks that he should return it, but then realizes that none of his fears will come true. As some of the scenes will showcase and represent, the power that this suit holds is beyond anything he's ever felt before. And with this newfound power, the people closest to him, the people that he's allowed to let into his life, as per the arc that he went through in the last film, will now be protected forever. Because the power that he holds will mean that nothing like Aunt May will ever happen ever again. We will then cut to a scene with Roderick Kingsley. His investors aren't impressed, saying that he could lose everything if he doesn't get that goo back. This comes around as his investors also realize the true nature, the true power, and the true worth of the suit that Kingsley has lost. Afraid to lose his power and afraid to lose his influence, Kingsley makes a vow to stop at nothing until he gets that suit back. And that's when Kingsley finds out it was in fact Spider-Man that stole the suit. He sees a news report of the black-suited Spider-Man. Spider-Man stole it. That night at the expo, he was there. It was all a plan. It was all a ploy. Spider-Man is behind this all. And with that, Kingsley has his mission in mind as he holds up the Hobgoblin mask in front of his face. He will stop at nothing until he gets that suit back. We then cut to Peter back at college with a newfound confidence. Similar to the montage that happened in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, we will start to explore the idea that Peter now has a new confidence about him. He feels new, his mind finally not plagued by the idea of Carly or Miles' death. Miles and Peter will meet up, and Miles notices the change in Peter. Peter also bumps into Carly and apologizes and asks if they can go out again. Carly ends up accepting, saying yes, and Peter thinks to himself that the suit is a cure. Everything starts going right in his life, personally and with Spider-Man. Spider-Man is more powerful than ever, and Peter is on a win. Peter also sends more videos and photos to J. Jonah Jameson, who is impressed, and once again, Peter gets another indication that everything in life is going the way it should be. It then comes time for Peter to go on his date with Carly. He thinks to himself that he'll hang around as Spider-Man before he goes on the date. And when looking at what suit to choose, he chooses the black and tosses the red and blue onto the bed in front of him, leaving his apartment as the black-suited Spider-Man. However, as Peter swings through the city confidently, this is where it all comes crashing down, as we get the first appearance of the Hobgoblin. Hobgoblin attacks Spider-Man out of nowhere, and the two engage in battle. Spider-Man asking who is he, and the Hobgoblin will say that he wants back what is rightfully his, and Peter doesn't even know what to think. However, Peter is caught off guard, as Peter looks into the Hobgoblin's eyes, the Goblin persona bringing back awful memories for him, reinstating his biggest fear in this film. The Hobgoblin will say that he's stolen what's his, and Peter will barely get away. The fight will come to a close, and Peter won't know what's hit him.
Carly Cooper, on the other hand, has been ditched again, and she angrily texts Peter, asking Peter where he is. However, this is when we enter a new stage in the film, where Peter becomes scared by the prospect of Norman Osborn's return. Peter ignores Carly's and Miles' text, who both try to contact him. He obsesses over the next few days to try and find a Norman that exists within the MCU, but he can't find anything. As Norman Osborn mentioned in Spider-Man No Way Home, Oscorp, his son, and none of that exists in the MCU. However, the appearance of the Hobgoblin has frightened Peter to death. He realizes that the prospect of the Goblin's return is all the more possible. So he does some digging, scared as to what he could find. However, he can't find anything. He was just being overdramatic. So who is the Hobgoblin, Peter would think to himself. And then he thinks back to the fashion show. Could the Hobgoblin be Roderick Kingsley? It would certainly make sense, and everything would line up. We will then get a scene where Spider-Man confronts Kingsley, but Kingsley simply says that he's just a fashion designer, playing it low-key and cool. Peter becomes angry, however, the symbiote fueling his emotions. He will smash things in Kingsley's office, asking for answers. However, Kingsley won't give him any, and Peter has no proof, so leaves still at square one. However, after Kingsley watches Spider-Man swing off into the distance, he holds up the Hobgoblin mask in front of him as he begins to follow Spider-Man. The Hobgoblin keeps a safe distance as he follows Spider-Man to an alleyway where he gets changed into Peter Parker, recreating the famous panel from Amazing Spider-Man issue 39, but instead of the Green Goblin, it's the Hobgoblin. We then cut to a few scenes with Carly Cooper. She's angry. She just wants answers. Why isn't Peter answering her? She will ask Miles where he is, and Miles will also say that he doesn't know. Miles will give her his address, and she eventually decides to confront him at his apartment if he won't answer his phone. She knocks on the door and asks if he's in there. However, to no avail. There is no answer. She calls him a coward, and in her anger, she breaks into Peter's apartment. However, as she stands there taking in his apartment, she glances over to his bed, where just on top of the covers lays the blue and red Spider-Man costume. And that's when it dawns on her, and that's when it clicks. Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And the questions that she had are answered in one sudden moment. After Carly had left, Peter returns to his apartment. Miles will call him asking him if he's okay, however Peter is really not in the mood. Miles will say that Carly is worried, and Peter says that he's got bigger things on his mind, as he throws his phone at the wall. Even though Peter had taken the suit off, the suit starts to consume him again, as he starts to get enraged more and more, smashing things in his apartment, until he looks towards a photo of Aunt May. And then he looks at his hands. What has he become? An emotional, angry, revenge-fueled mess. She wouldn't want this. He still thinks back to Norman Osborn. He still thinks back to that day. The people closest to him. He couldn't bear to suffer the same pain. And that's when he realizes the symbiote, it isn't a cure. It doesn't make him forget. It only makes it worse. He has to confront his fears head on, instead of trying to distract himself. Because in the end, he's going to be worse for wear. And this is the point in the film where Peter decides to take the suit off, as we get the famous clock tower scene, this time with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. The symbiote puts up a fight, but Peter manages to win in the end as it escapes. The next day in college, Peter apologizes to Miles. He says he was stressed over work, and Miles will say it's okay, but it's not with Carly. He has to speak to her. Make it right. Peter will nod. Peter will end up meeting with Carly later that day. However, before he had chance to even say a word, the Hobgoblin once again attacks. Now knowing Peter's secret identity, he puts up a fight that he couldn't before. He goes straight for the heart, and Peter's worst fears come true. Hobgoblin swoops off with Carly Cooper in his arms. Peter has no choice but to go after him. Peter swings up to the Hobgoblin as they engage in battle. Carly falls on top of a building. Peter does his best to keep up with the Hobgoblin. However, the Hobgoblin is a strong and worthy opponent, and without the symbiote, Peter finds it a lot harder to combat the might of the Goblin. The Hobgoblin will ask Peter where the suit is, and Peter will say he doesn't know, he's taken it off. He will go on to tell the Hobgoblin that it's dangerous, he shouldn't be messing with that suit, and the Hobgoblin will beg to differ, saying that he's going to kill Carly if he doesn't tell him where it is. And in a moment of desperation, Peter engages in battle with the Hobgoblin once again, eventually coming out on top. The Hobgoblin is eventually arrested and is revealed to be Roderick Kingsley all along. We then cut to one final scene between Peter and Carly, who make up. Peter says he's wanted to tell her all this time, and Carly tells Peter that she already knows. And then they kiss, they embrace, a massive weight off Peter's shoulders. And with that, Peter Parker will struggle no more, as his mind is finally free from the burden. His fears can be realized, and instead of using the symbiote as a form of escape, he can tell Carly the truth, and brutally be honest with himself about the way that he feels. And with that, and with Peter's arc and story finally complete, in conjunction with what he learned in MCU Spider-Man 4, we end the film right there. We open this film with Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin. The mayor has been busy at work, and similar to the opening of the last film, the symbiote has been retrieved at the start. However, this time it is revealed that the Kingpin has come into possession of it. The Kingpin realizes the power that it holds. During this time, it is also revealed that the Kingpin was the one who thrust the attack on Kingsley's fashion show in the last film. Fisk will have been working hard to understand the symbiote and what it can do. He finds a way to splice the symbiote into two different bits, similar to how a piece of the Venom symbiote detached from Eddie Brock at the end of No Way Home. Fisk realizes that if he can't take down Spider-Man with regular superpowered villains, he'll have to take them down with an army of symbiote-powered ones instead. We then cut to Peter Parker, our main protagonist. Peter has finally completed his 2-film arc that loomed over him after the end of No Way Home. However, Peter's journey is about to come full circle in this film. He'll be swinging through the city on his way to stop a crime going down. The two villains, Butane and Beetle, will be teaming up to cause a ruckus in Chinatown. Spider-Man swings in to stop them, however, both of them will be a little bit too much for Peter to handle, and he'll get beaten down and they will both get away. Not only that, a civilian will get severely injured in the process, thus introducing us to Peter's main struggle throughout this 6th installment. As we then cut to a scene with Carly Cooper, Peter's now long-term girlfriend, she will ask him how his day was. Peter will tell her that it wasn't good, and that he feels like he isn't good enough for the city. As this scene goes on, a news broadcast will come on in the background, questioning Spider-Man's actions, and if he's what the city needs. Now the Avengers are upstate, and the likes of Daredevil aren't superpowered beings, Spider-Man is the only one who can fulfill that role. But is he doing enough? And is he good enough? These are questions that New York City will be posing to our hero. This will be clearly plaguing Peter's mind. After feeling the power of the symbiote and what it's capable of in the last film, Peter feels like his current abilities aren't good enough, almost like a withdrawal. This is Peter's story in this film, and something that he will struggle with mentally, and something he has to overcome. Peter and Carly will then make their way over to the Feast Center, where it is revealed that Miles Morales has just gotten a part-time job there while he's still at college. We will get this idea that this is the new trio of this franchise. However, Miles still doesn't know that Peter is Spider-Man, and Carly will be urging Peter to tell him, but Peter doesn't think he should. The less people know, the better, but Carly will say that Miles has been there for him throughout the last year or so. Everything that Peter's been through, his highs, his lows, Miles has always been there. He deserves to know what his best friend gets up to. Peter will say that he'll think about it. We then cut back to the Kingpin, who recruits the villains that Spider-Man has fought at the start of the film, Butane and the Beetle, and then ends up giving them both the symbiote in exchange for catching in and bringing Spider-Man. They both accept this new power, not realizing the dangerous side effects that it could come with. Beetle and Butane bond with the symbiote, and we get our first symbiote-infused villains. We then cut back to Peter and Carly, who that night go on a date. Of course, in classic Peter Parker fashion, duty calls during the date, and things go pear-shaped around the city. Carly tells him to go, understanding that he has to be Spider-Man. Peter puts on the costume and swings over to the scene where he encounters both symbiote versions of Beetle and Butane. Peter instantly recognizes them and the suit that they are wearing. Peter gets flashbacks to when he took the suit off in the last film and realizes that it must have fallen into the wrong hands. Peter fights the two villains. However, if he didn't stand much of a chance before, he definitely doesn't now, and Peter's inner insecurities get the better of him. He overthinks every move, he overthinks every punch and kick, resulting in him getting absolutely battered down. Butane and the Beetle will come out on top very, very convincingly. However, just before they were about to take him back to Fisk, something starts to happen. Something starts to happen with their suits. They start to transform and lose control of themselves. You see, the symbiote can only be controlled by its host for a short period of time, and that's why it took a little bit longer for someone like Spider-Man, who is stronger physically and mentally. However, for the average everyday person, it starts to poison and take control pretty quickly. Beetle and Butane start to roar in a Venom-like fashion, and their attention is taken away from Spider-Man as they start causing destruction elsewhere. Peter looks up, seeing the fire and destruction around him. How could he let this happen? He is currently proving to himself that he isn't good enough. Peter stands up and looks on as the villains destroy some city blocks around him, and he runs away. Spider-Man runs away. And this is Peter at his lowest point. We cut to a scene between Peter and Carly as Carly wraps up bloodied and bruised parts of Peter's body, similar to the scene with Peter and Gwen in TASM 1. Peter says that he's not good enough, and now they have that suit, the suit that Peter took off at the clock tower. Peter thinks to himself that all of the events leading up to this moment are his fault. He could have changed these events, just reaffirming to himself that he isn't good enough. Carly will tell Peter not to be stupid. Of course she doesn't think he's a failure. Of course he is good enough. She holds his head up and will speak to him softly. When he first told her that he was Spider-Man, she didn't know what to think. She was overwhelmed with emotion. Her boyfriend was Spider-Man after all. Maybe it bothered her slightly, but when she thought about it more, it's admirable. He puts his life on the line to save so many people's lives. Not many people would do that. She will tell Peter that she will love him, and Peter will lock eyes with her and say it back. They hold their heads against each other. This scene in particular will be very important for the trilogy. Not only does it showcase what kind of character Carly is, especially in conjunction with her character from the comics, but also that Peter has the reassurance from people around him now, which reinforces his arc from the last 2 films. He has those people there for him. And then in the corner of their eyes, a fireball. Across the city, they both look to see Rikers Island in tatters. Peter looks at Carly and looks back to the fireball. He looks back to Carly again, saying he can't do this. He'll fail. With or without him, the city is going to fall. Carly tells him he can't think like that. Carly tells him that he's fought for this city multiple times for so many years. He can't stop now. There's no one else but him that can do this. There's no one else that could do this but Spider-Man, but Peter Parker. Peter hesitantly heads towards the window of his apartment, knowing what faces him, what faces the city. He has to do this. He's Spider-Man. Spider-Man swings over to the scene, and a bunch of other villains he's faced before also have the symbiote, including Scorpion, Hobgoblin, who is now the MCU's version of Red Goblin, Shocker, and Vulture, who I imagine after Secret Wars would have been transported back to the MCU. Along with Butane and Beetle, these villains make up a group known as the Symbiote Six. At first I thought it would be cool to do a version of the Sinister Six, but since Tom's version of the character has already fought something close to that in No Way Home, I thought I would do something a little different. Of course the battle will be fierce, and similar to the Rikers Island breakout during Spider-Man PS4, Peter will get battered down. However, it will be more violent and chaotic than in the game, as the symbiotes start to take over. Amongst this, Spider-Man tries to save as many people as he possibly can, but it's too late. The symbiotes are mass-producing and taking over, and this is when we are introduced to the idea of Symbiote City in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We then cut over to Carly, who frantically makes her way over to the Feast Center to help Miles. They stay strong as the symbiote population begins to grow. We cut back to Peter, who is barely still alive, but has enough energy to just about carry on. As the symbiote versions of Peter's villains head towards the city, Peter stands up and looks as the destruction rages on. He thinks there is only one man to confront with all of this, the most powerful man in the city. We cut to a scene of Peter confronting Wilson Fisk. Peter says that he knows they've had their differences, but they know they have to work together to stop whatever is going on. Fisk says whatever happens is unstoppable. What's in motion cannot be undone. Fisk sits down at his mayor's office desk after looking over the city that he once had control over. Spider-Man heads towards the desk as Fisk carries on speaking. He'll sit there and reminisce about the battle that they've had with one another over the years, about the fights that they have both endured, and about how both sides are as stubborn as each other. And Fisk will give his admiration for Spider-Man, saying that he respects him for that. No matter what Fisk threw at him, he got back up, reforming the reassurance that Carly was trying to instill in him earlier in the movie, but this time it's coming from his greatest rival. Fisk will say to him that their time has come, and if one of them can't win in this fierce battle that they keep having with each other, then both of them will lose, as Fisk admits defeat, saying that soon they'll both die to the symbiotes, or become one of them. Spider-Man looks out to the city and looks back down at Fisk, saying he refuses. He refuses to back down. If there's one thing they can both agree on, it's that they don't want this city to go under, because without it, neither of them have a purpose. And with that, Peter, begrudgingly at first, then holds his hand out to Wilson Fisk. And after all the hard-fought battles, Fisk looks up towards Spider-Man and thinks for a second, before taking it, telling the webhead that at the very least, he's inspirational. And with that, Wilson Fisk joins Spider-Man's side to fight against the symbiotes. Wilson Fisk says he may know a guy that can help, And thus we are thrust into the final part of the film, where we are introduced to Alistair Smythe, a physicist who worked under Fisk at one point in his career. Fisk claims that he can work on a cure. They will meet with him in a secret underground bunker. However, they will have been followed, as someone breaks through the door. Peter turns to face them. It's Black Cat, with a symbiote. A massive fight between the two of them breaks out as Smythe whips out a prototype of the cure and hands it to Spider-Man. During the fight, Spider-Man releases the cure, and the symbiote retracts itself from Black Cat. Felicia and Peter reunite as she thanks him. However, she quickly stands up, realizing that she's in the presence of Fisk, reminding us of the story of Spider-Man 4 between the two of them. Peter calms her down, saying that they have bigger issues to focus on at the moment. And that's when he gets a call from Carly. He picks up and she says that she's at Feast, and it's under attack. She needs his help. Peter and Felicia team up as they head to Feast. Peter tells Fisk to carry on working on the cure, and to let him know the progress. Just before he leaves, Smythe hands Peter another vial of the cure just in case. Spider-Man and Black Cat arrive at Feast, to find that it's under attack by symbiote Scorpion. Just as they did in Spider-Man 4, a fight between Spider-Man Cat and the Scorpion break out. Peter, during the rematch, uses the cure against Scorpion, as the symbiote once again retracts itself. And with that, Mac Gargan and Spider-Man have their first interaction since the end of the 4th installment. Mac thanks Spider-Man and Black Cat for saving him. Scorpion recognizes that the situation they find themselves in is a lot bigger than the feud that they once had, as he asks how he can help. Peter says to stay here with Feast and protect it at all costs. Peter and Carly reunite, as he tells her that the Scorpion will be staying here with her to help protect the place with Black Cat. I imagine a funny little interaction between Carly and Felicia here, as they're both people who have had romantic relations with Peter at one point or another. Either way, Peter will leave, and will return to Fisk and Smythe. Smythe will say that he's mass-produced the cure. All he needs to do is to release it from a high enough point over the city to create a widespread effect, kind of like a bioweapon, similar to how Dr. Connors used the lizard gas in TASM 1. Smythe will be taken by Spider-Man to the top of the Chrysler building to install the cure. However, that's when they become under attack from two more villains of Spider-Man's past, Symbiote Vulture and Hobgoblin, who with the symbiote will now be Red Goblin. Spider-Man fiercely fights both Vulture and Red Goblin in an intense air battle, something that we've rarely seen in Spider-Man films before, which would be quite interesting. The villains will get the upper hand, as Spider-Man isn't used to fighting in the air as much as he is on the ground. They will constantly try to disarm Smythe to make sure the cure isn't ready to go, but Peter will just about come out on top in stopping them. And during the last dire moments, Smythe will activate the cure, in which it will be sent up into the atmosphere and in a mass spread over the city. Just as Peter couldn't hold on any longer, fighting both Red Goblin and the Vulture, the symbiote infection will finally be cured, and Spider-Man can breathe a sigh of relief. During the end of the film, the villains will be sent back to prison, and Wilson Fisk will be found to be behind the spread of the infection, and will be released from his mayor role, and will finally be behind bars. For how long though? Who knows? Peter will then stand triumphantly over the city. In the end, he was the right man for the job. He helped save the city. He doubted his abilities without the symbiote. He doubted if he himself could do this. When all the odds were stacked against him, and when the city looked like it was going to finally go under, and when it looked like that this was Spider-Man's greatest battle, Peter was the one to pull through, and the one to save everyone else. Spider-Man saved the day. Not only will Peter recognize this in himself, but so will the city. We cut to 6 months later as we come to the end of the film. Carly and Peter are happy in their relationship. Carly is coming to the end of her fashion degree at college, and Peter is almost finished in his degree as well. They both talk about their future with each other, as it looks like they potentially might be planning to move out together. However, Peter says he has to do one last thing, as he heads to Miles, who is now well integrated in at Feast. He takes him to the back room, and Peter says that he has something to tell Miles that he's wanted to tell him for a very, very long time. And Miles says something's happened to him as well, and he needs to tell Peter. Peter asks, what is that? And in a moment of utter surprise, Miles reveals to Peter that he has powers just like Spider-Man. And in a what the F moment, similar to how Homecoming ended, we end our final film of the college trilogy right there.
Thank you all for watching the pre-write of the MCU Spider-Man College Trilogy. On the left of your screen, you can see the first part in my own Spider-Man cinematic universe, and on the right-hand side of the screen, you can go and check out my spectacular Spider-Man series, starting all the way from Season 3, Episode 1, continuing the show. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. We're so close to 5,000 subscribers, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, and keep writing stories.